Charles Whitmore waited until all 400 guests were looking at him before he opened the velvet box. "My son has always believed in giving people opportunities," he said, smiling toward the head table. "And no one understands opportunity better than our bride's mother." My daughter's fingers tightened around her champagne glass. Beside her, Ethan stopped smiling. Inside the box lay a silver-plated hotel keycard mounted on polished walnut. Beneath it, a small engraved plate read. A few people laughed before they understood what they were laughing at. Then the ballroom went quiet. Behind Charles, 2 large screens displayed an old employee photograph of me in a gray housekeeping uniform. I was 28, tired and smiling beside a linen cart. Charles turned the plaque toward me as if he expected gratitude. He believed he was showing the room where I belonged. He did not know that 3 days later, Whitmore Grand Hotels might need my vote to decide whether he still belonged there. 3 days earlier, I had arrived at the Whitmore Grand Philadelphia carrying my own garment bag. A bellman reached for it before both my shoes touched the pavement. "I've got it," I said. He stepped back with the polite smile hotel employees used when guests refused help after silently asking for it. The lobby had changed since the years when I knew it from the service side. The front desk had moved 10 feet to the left. Pale marble had replaced the brown tile. A glass sculpture stood where 2 leather chairs had once been, but hotels never changed as completely as owners liked to believe. The banquet elevators were still too far from the kitchen. A floral display near the west entrance blocked part of a security camera. A faint dark line marked the carpet where service carts crossed from the ballroom corridor to the freight elevator. Most guests saw chandeliers and polished stone. I saw the roots people used when they were carrying something heavy. At the front desk, a young receptionist checked my name. "Welcome, Miss Carter. You're assigned to the family floor." Before she could hand me the key card, a man in a charcoal suit stepped around the desk. "Ms. Carter." Daniel Ruiz had more silver in his hair than when I last saw him, but the careful way he watched a room had not changed. "Daniel." He shook my hand with both of his. "I wasn't expecting you until Wednesdays. Today I'm only Lily's mother." His voice dropped. "M. Sloan moved the Independent Review to 8 in the morning. Her office said you would understand." "I do." Someone called his name from across the lobby. Daniel excused himself. When I turned, Charles Whitmore stood several feet away watching me. "Helen," he said. "You've been here 5 minutes and already know the general manager." I've known Daniel for years. Charles glanced at the garment bag over my arm. "No assistant? I'm attending a wedding, Charles. I'm not invading a country." Victoria Whitmore laughed too quickly. She wore cream silk, perfect makeup, and the expression of a woman who had spent decades smoothing the sharp edges of the man beside her. Charles turned to the receptionist. "There's been a room adjustment. Miss Carter will be in the West Guest Wing." The receptionist looked at her computer. "I have her directly across from the bridal suite. That room is needed for immediate family." There was a pause. I watched the receptionist decide whether I counted. "The West Suite is smaller," she said carefully. "It's also quieter," Charles replied. "Helen has always struck me as practical." Lily crossed the lobby before I could answer. "Mom." She hugged me hard enough to wrinkle the front of her dress. Her hair smelled like lavender shampoo and the vanilla lotion she had used since high school. Then she saw the new key card. "Why are you in the West Wing?" "It's fine," Charles answered for me. "We made a minor adjustment. She was supposed to be next to me." "Your Aunt Victoria needs the room for wardrobe access." Victoria looked briefly surprised, then recovered. "I can use another room." Charles checked his watch. "The rehearsal starts in 40 minutes. We don't need to reorganize the floor." Ethan joined us, his tie hanging loose around his collar. He was intelligent and capable, but within a few feet of his father always seemed to take up less space. "I'll call upstairs," he said. "No need," I told him. Lily's mouth tightened. "Mom, one elevator ride won't hurt me." Charles gave me an approving nod as if I had behaved correctly. Lily pulled me aside. "I'm sorry, you didn't move me." "I should have checked. You have enough to manage." Her eyes shifted toward Charles. "Please don't let him get to you this weekend." That landed harder than the room change. She was not defending him. I knew that. Lily had spent months trying to keep 2 families from scraping against each other, but her first request was still for me to absorb the impact quietly, not for Charles to stop creating it. "I came to see you get married," I said. "That's what I'm going to do." On my way to the elevators, I passed a maintenance worker wearing a blue contractor badge. not brid faculties grew up, slowed. The name had appeared more than once in documents waiting for me at home. The worker noticed me looking and turned the badge inward. My sweet-faced city hall. The air conditioner rattled every 30 seconds, and the carpet smelled faintly damp, as if the room had been cleaned too quickly. I hung my navy dress in the closet. Lily had helped me choose it. She said the color made my eyes look brighter. I had not told her it cost more than the monthly rent on my first apartment. On the desk sat a cream envelope. In the upper left corner were the words, H.C., Hospitality Holdings, LP. Below that, private and confidentially slid it into my suitcase without opening it. Wednesday was for business. The wedding belonged to Lily. At the time, I still believed those two things could remain separate. The first full wedding walkthrough began at 5. Within 10 minutes, Charles had corrected the coordinator 4 times. The groom's parents should enter last. The first 2 rows are for family. The photographer needs to understand which guests matter during the processional. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. Charles spoke as though every preference of his had already been approved somewhere more important. A printed ceremony program lay on each chair. I picked one up. The paragraph Lily had shown me a month earlier was gone. Her original version had thanked me for raising her alone. It said I had taught her that honest work was never something to hide. The printed version said only, "We thank our families for their love and support." Lily saw the program in my hand. "Mom, it's nicely printed." "That isn't what I sent." Charles looked over from the aisle. The original paragraph was too personal. Lily turned. "You changed it? I refined it." "You had no right." The printer needed approval. The wording made the program sound like a hardship appeal. Ethan stepped beside her. "Dad, you should have asked." Charles looked at him mildly. "Would you like to postpone the wedding while we debate adjectives?" The coordinator lowered her clipboard. No one spoke. Charles had a talent for making resistance look unreasonable. He created the problem, then handed everyone else the cost of objecting. Lily held the program so tightly the paper bent. "No one is ashamed of my mother." "Of course not," Charles said. "That is why there was no need to announce her employment history to 400 people. I folded the program and placed it back on the chair. "We aren't delaying the walkthrough over this." Lily looked at me. "It matters. So does tomorrow." I saw the frustration in her face. She wanted me to fight him, but she also wanted the room to settle. She wanted both things and hated herself for it. The coordinator called everyone into position. As I crossed the aisle, the smell of floor polish brought back a kitchen no bigger than the hotel's coat room. I had been 28. Lily had been 8 months old. Her father had left 6 weeks earlier, taking half our savings and most of my belief that promises protected anyone. At night I ironed my housekeeping uniform, while Lily slept in a borrowed bassinet beside the kitchen table. Steam dampened my hair. The apartment radiator knocked all winter, and the woman upstairs played the television too loudly. I did not remember those months as one long tragedy. I remembered being tired. I remembered learning which grocery store marked down milk after 7. I remembered the first Friday I paid the electric bill and still had $12 left. That $12 felt like proof that I could build something. "Ms. Carter?" The coordinator's voice pulled me back. "You'll stand here." During the break, Daniel brought me a bottle of water. "I heard North Star renewed Baltimore," he said, "for another 3 years. That training program kept half our rooms open during the labor shortage." Before I could answer, Charles approached. "Daniel, the florist needs someone authorized to approve changes." Daniel's eyes stayed on mine for half a second. "Of course." After he left, Charles said, "North Star still keeping you busy?" "Enough." Lily told us it was a small staffing agency. "Regional?" Across the aisle, Lily stopped talking to the bridesmaid beside her. North Star had contracts in 11 states. It trained housekeepers, banquet crews, front desk staff, and temporary supervisors. I had stepped away from daily operations 6 years earlier, but I remained its founder and non-executive chair. "Is that what Lily told you?" I asked. Charles smiled. "She speaks very proudly of you." Later, Lily found me near the ballroom doors. "I should have explained it better." "What did you tell them?" "That you had a hospitality staffing business." "And?" She glanced through the open doors. "I said it was small." "Why?" "You've heard how Charles talks about service workers. So you thought making my business smaller would make him kinder?" "I thought if he didn't know about housekeeping, he couldn't use it against you." The answer was honest. That did not make it painless. "Were you protecting me?" I asked. Or were you protecting the way they saw you? Her face changed. That isn't fair. No, I said. It isn't. I regretted the sharpness as soon as I heard it. Lily had always watched for signs that people might leave. Her father had walked out when she was a baby and built another life somewhere else. Even after she understood that his leaving was not her fault, some part of her kept trying to become too easy to abandon. At 9, she used to clean the kitchen before I came home from work, then study my face to see whether she had done enough. I had spent years telling her love was not payment for good behavior. Fear had listened better than she had. I touched her arm. I know you love me. I do, I know. I'll put the paragraph into my dinner speech. You don't have to turn my life into a defense argument. I want them to know who you are. For one dangerous second, I nearly told her about the cream envelope, about Wednesday, about why Daniel had expected me. Instead, I kissed her temple. Then don't apologize for the parts that kept us alive. As we went back inside, Daniel was speaking with the hotel's chief financial officer. Both men looked toward me, then toward Charles. Neither came over, but both knew exactly who I was. The seating chart was waiting in the bridal suite the next morning. 6 whiteboards stood against the wall, each covered with names written in gold ink. Lily was barefoot, holding a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. Where's Aunt June? The co-coordinator ran one finger down the list. Table 41. Near the kitchen doors. She'll have more room there. Charles sat by the window answering emails. Lily pulled Aunt June's card from the board. She has arthritis. She can't spend the night being hit by service carts. Charles did not look up. The table is perfectly comfortable. I checked the names around it. Aunt June was there. So were my cousins, 2 retired teachers who had watched Lily after school, and Mrs. Bell, the neighbor who once kept Lily between my night shift and the first morning bus. The nearest tables were filled with Whitmore executives and donors. This isn't the chart Lily approved, I said. We adjusted it for social flow, Charles replied. Lily removed another card. Move Aunt June to table 6. The coordinator hesitated. That table is marked for close family. She is close family. Charles set down his phone. The Whitmores have professional obligations. Some guests have traveled internationally. Aunt June rode a bus for 6 hours, Lily said. Ethan entered while she was rearranging the board. Charles pointed toward her. Tell your fiancé this is unnecessary. Ethan studied the chart. Who needs to be moved? It was a small act, but Charles noticed it. Ethan and Lily worked through the tables together. They moved my relatives closer to the dance floor and placed 2 younger Whitmore associates near the service doors. When they finished, Charles said, I hope everyone remembers who is paying for the reception. Money buys dinner, I said. It doesn't decide who counts as family. His eyes settled on me, then he smiled. It was a quick, controlled smile, the kind a man used when he had decided to remember an insult for later. He reached for a folder on the side table. Ethan, I need your signature. The Northbridge Facilities logo appeared across the top page. Ethan did not take the folder. I told you the quantities don't match the field reports. The work is complete. That doesn't make the invoice accurate. The vendor has already been paid. Then why do you need me to certify it now? The room quieted. Charles lowered his voice. Because you are Director of Sustainable Operations, and because you want my name beneath the numbers. Lily looked between them. What numbers? Nothing connected to the wedding, Charles said. I stepped close enough to read part of the page. 3 hotel renovation projects, insulation, heat pumps, energy management equipment. One equipment quantity appeared nearly double what a property that size should have needed. Was Northbridge selected through competitive bidding? I asked. Ethan's head came up. Charles closed the folder. Hotel procurement is a little more complicated than temporary staffing, Helen. I'm sure it is. A young server entered carrying a coffee tray. I stood nearest to her, so she approached me first. Coffee? Mom? Charles exhaled. Mrs. Whitmore is the hostess. The server froze. Victoria gave him a tired look. Charles, it's fine. He glanced at the young woman's name tag. Rachel, guests at this level expect basic protocol. Her hand shook. Coffee splashed into a saucer. I'm sorry. You should be more careful. His correction was quiet enough to sound instructional. That made it worse. I took the cup before the tray could tilt. She offered coffee to the closest person. Charles looked at me. That isn't the point. It is to Rachel. Ethan lowered his head, hiding the beginning of a smile. Charles noticed. Your mother enjoys correcting people, he told Lily. Lily placed both hands flat against the seating board. She was correcting you. Charles stared at her. For a moment no one moved, then he picked up the Northbridge folder. Ethan. Hallway. They left the suite. The door did not close completely. Charles's voice carried back. You will sign the certification before the vows. I need the original bids. You need enough judgment to understand where your future comes from. My future shouldn't depend on approving numbers I can't verify. Sign it, Charles said. Or don't expect an office when you return. Footsteps moved away. Ethan came back alone. Lily crossed the room. Are the invoices wrong? I don't know yet. That isn't an answer. I haven't seen the original comparison. Then get it. My father controls the files. I watched him. People who demand blind loyalty usually make the truth difficult to reach. Ethan looked at me. How do you know so much about procurement? I know enough to recognize pressure. You really started in housekeeping? Yes. And then you built North Star? Yes. Before he could ask more, Charles returned and took the folder from Ethan's hands. We're finished discussing company business. His attention shifted to me. And Helen, for Lily's sake, perhaps this weekend can be about moving forward, not where anyone began. The message was clear. My past was acceptable only when it stayed out of sight. That afternoon, I returned to my suite and found a second envelope beneath the brass desk lamp. No company logo, no return address, only 4 words printed across the front. Confidential. Aditi. Mysterious. I locked the door before touching it. My phone rang. Margaret Sloane's name appeared on the screen. Helen, she said when I answered. The preliminary report changed. I looked at the envelope. How much? Enough that Wednesday may not be routine. Downstairs, Lily was choosing flowers for her wedding. Somewhere else in the hotel, Charles Whitmore was waiting for his son's signature, and in front of me sat a report that could change far more than one seating chart. Margaret waited until I had locked the door before continuing. 2 findings were strengthened this afternoon, she said. Procurement and payroll compliance. Northbridge? You know I cannot discuss unverified exhibits over an unsecured call. That means yes. It means you should read the packet and wait for authentication. Margaret had spoken to regulators, judges, and frightened executives in the same dry tone. It was one reason I trusted her. What happens Wednesday? The independent directors meet first. If the report supports immediate action, the board can suspend Charles. Permanent removal would require a completed investigation, another board vote, and shareholder ratification under the family governance agreement. Do they have enough votes? We don't count votes before people review the record. That was not an answer, but it was as close as she would come. A knock sounded at the door. I have to go. Council will send the H. Carter authorization form tonight, Margaret said. Do not sign until you have reviewed the exhibits. The holding company had always voted through outside counsel under the abbreviated name H. Carter. The board chair, general counsel, transfer agent, and external auditor knew the beneficial owner. Ordinary management reports listed only the entity. I ended the call and slid the packet beneath a hotel notepad. Lily stood outside with 2 cups of coffee and a pale blue garment bag. I brought peace offerings. For what? The florist. The room. Charles. Pick one. She unzipped the bag. A silk robe hung inside. My initials had been embroidered near the collar asses. I thought you should have something that was just yours tomorrow. I touched the stitching. Helen Carter, she said. In case this family makes you forget. The joke was light, but her eyes were not. I hugged her. She held on longer than usual. For a moment, I considered telling her why those initials appeared on more than a robe. Then she began talking about hair appointments, photographs, and a missing box of place cards. The moment passed because I allowed it to. That choice would matter later. Breakfast was held the next morning in a private dining room overlooking the river. Charles greeted Aunt June with surprising warmth. He remembered she had worked in a school and asked whether children were more difficult now than 20 years earlier. They have better phones, June said. The excuses are about the same. Charles laughed. When he wanted to be charming, he was very good at it. That was part of what made him difficult. People who saw only that version assumed the rest of us had misunderstood him. He told a funny story about Ethan reorganizing the family garage at 12. Even Ethan laughed. Then Charles explained almost tenderly that he had spent his life protecting a company built by 3 generations of Whitmores. Hotels survive on standards, he said. One neglected detail becomes 10. It sounded reasonable. 5 minutes later, a housekeeping supervisor named Marisol entered. There's a water stain near the south ballroom entrance, Charles said. Maintenance opened the wall. A pipe joint failed overnight. The reception begins this afternoon. They're replacing it now. And the carpet? My team can extract it after maintenance finishes. Good, keep them until it's done. Marisol hesitated. 2 attendants finish at 2. I'll need overtime approval. Charles glanced at the clock. We'll sort out the paperwork afterward. That phrase bothered me. Afterward usually means workers spend a week wondering whether they'll be paid, I said. Charles turned toward me. Payroll will handle it. Then approve it now. The table quieted. Helen, the hotel is responding to an emergency. So are the attendants. Their time still belongs to them. Marisol kept her expression neutral, but her fingers tightened around the folder she carried. Charles studied me. Then he looked at her. Fortnight the overtime. Send the cost to maintenance. Yes, sir. It was the correct decision. For half a second I wondered whether I had judged him too quickly. Then he added, next time, I expect housekeeping to identify visible damage before a guest does. The pipe was inside the wall, Marisol said. Charles had already turned away. After she left, he smiled at the table. My father used to say a hotel manager must solve the problem first and debate responsibility later. That would sound better, Aunt June said, if you hadn't blamed the wrong person first. Ethan looked down. This time he was not hiding a smile. He looked tired. Lily squeezed my hand beneath the table. I'm glad you said something. A few minutes later she followed me into the corridor. Mom, can you choose your moments today? I thought that was a moment. It was. I know it was. She pressed her fingers to her forehead. But whenever you challenge him, he tightens his grip on something else. The schedule. The tables, Ethan. That is his choice. I know, but I'm the one standing in the middle. I heard the strain in her voice. I won't start a fight, she exhaled, but I won't pretend not to see one. Her shoulders dropped again. That's what I was afraid you'd say. The sentence hurt because she did not mean it cruelly. She was simply more afraid of my honesty than of Charles's behavior. My honesty caused immediate disruption. His behavior had become part of the furniture. Before I could answer, the photographer called everyone into the ballroom. Charles positioned the Whitmores beneath an arch of white roses. Immediate family first, he said. I stepped toward Lily. The photographer checked his list. Mr. Whitmore requested one set with the groom's family only. Lily looked at Charles. It's for the Family Foundation newsletter, he said. We'll do the full group afterward. I waited for her to object. She opened her mouth. Then the photographer raised his camera. The bridesmaids began arranging Lily's train, and someone said they were already 20 minutes behind. Lily looked at me. Just one photo, Mom. I stepped aside. The camera flashed. Charles stood beside my daughter with one hand resting behind her shoulder. Victoria smiled. Ethan looked uncomfortable but stayed in place. Lily smiled because everyone was waiting for her to smile. I had worked holidays, missed sleep, and taken buses through snow to make sure that girl never stood alone. Yet in the first formal portrait of her new family, I was watching from behind the lighting equipment. The photograph lasted less than 30 seconds. The pain did not. When it ended, Lily came straight to me. Now, Mom. She took my hand and pulled me beneath the flowers. Charles said the photographer needed to move on. Lily ignored him. We're taking one with my mother. She placed me beside her, not at the edge. The camera flashed again. It did not erase the first photograph, but it kept the first one from becoming the only truth. By noon, Charles had moved the speeches, changed the order of the dances, and replaced one of Lily's chosen songs with a string arrangement preferred by a Whitmore donor. Every decision came with an explanation. The donor was elderly. The orchestra had limited rehearsal time. Early speeches prevented guests from drinking too much. None of the explanations was absurd. That was how Charles operated. He hid control inside practicality. I found him near the guestbook table, holding the framed photograph from Lily's college graduation. In it, Lily had both arms around me. My suit came from a clearance rack. Her cap was crooked, and we were laughing too hard to face the camera. Charles handed it to an assistant. Place this in the smaller lounge. I took it before she could. Why? The entrance display should match the wedding portraits. It is a portrait of the bride. It has a different tone. Too inexpensive? His expression tightened. Too casual. You could have said that without moving it behind Lily's back. I'm trying to create a coherent event. You're trying to remove anything you didn't choose. The assistant stared at the floor. Charles nodded toward a conference room. May we speak privately? The room was cold and smelled faintly of coffee left too long on a burner. Charles closed the door but did not sit. I hope you understand that none of this is personal. Moving my relatives, rewriting Lily's words, and hiding her photograph feels remarkably efficient for something impersonal. He accepted the criticism without reacting. I have watched families damage marriages because parents refuse to let adult children separate. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think Lily depends heavily on your approval. She values my opinion. She consults you about finances, housing, disagreements with Ethan. Lily talks to me. That isn't a conspiracy. No, but it can become an obstacle. His concern was not entirely invented. There had been times when Lily called me before speaking honestly to Ethan. I usually sent her back to finish the conversation with him, but Charles would not know that. What are you asking? I said. He opened a leather folder and placed a document on the table. The first page described a consulting arrangement worth $250,000. The language was polished. In exchange for serving as an occasional advisor to a Whitmore family entity, I would agree not to involve myself in Lily and Ethan's financial planning, employment decisions, or discussions involving Whitmore Grand Hotels. Contact would be limited unless Lily initiated it. I read the paragraph twice not because it was complicated, because I wanted to understand how a man could place a price on a mother and expect the room to remain ordinary. This is not a payment to disappear, Charles said. It contains a schedule for how often I may speak to my daughter. It creates healthy boundaries. Healthy for whom? For a new marriage. I turned the page. The document also required confidentiality regarding company matters I might hear through Ethan. Does Grant Mercer know you're offering this? Charles's gaze sharpened. Why would he? Northbridge appears more than once in the restrictions. It is an example of confidential company information. An unusually specific example. He moved the folder closer. You are an intelligent woman, Helen. You built a respectable company. I'm not dismissing you. Respectable. I meant that as praise. I know. He drew a slow breath. I don't want Lily caught between two strong parents. Only one of us is trying to write rules for her marriage. Because only one of us understands what is at stake. The truth rose behind my teeth. I could have told him that I understood precisely what was at stake on Wednesday. I could have told him I had spent part of the previous night reading an audit summary that mentioned his office more often than Grant Mercer's. I could have told him H. Carter was not an old man behind a law office. Then I pictured Lily upstairs, surrounded by white flowers and women steaming her dress. Charles would not hear the truth quietly. He would drag it into the ballroom, accuse me of manipulating the marriage, and turn Lily's wedding into a fight over his job. I closed the folder. You cannot purchase distance between Lily and me. Everyone has a point at which emotion becomes impractical. Then you should stop confusing love with leverage. I pushed the agreement back. His face remained composed, but something colder entered his eyes. You may be making this harder for her. That depends on what you plan to do if I said no. I do not threaten guests. No, you rearrange the room and let them notice. For the first time, Charles looked genuinely angry, not loud. Not uncontrolled, wounded. He believed he had offered a civilized solution. My refusal challenged the story he told himself about being reasonable. I picked up the graduation photograph. My daughter is not a merger. I won't negotiate access to her. I opened the door. Behind me, Charles said. You think pride is free because someone else always paid the price. I stopped. He had found the one place where the insult could reach me. Lily had paid prices for my choices. She had spent evenings in hotel offices while I finished schedules. She had learned to heat canned soup before she could comfortably reach the stove. My work had protected her, but it had also shaped her. I turned back. You may be right that mothers leave marks on their children, I said. That still doesn't give you the right to invoice me for mine. I left before he could answer. Lily found me near the elevators. She saw my face and the photograph in my hand. What happened? Your future father-in-law offered me a consulting arrangement. She understood from my tone that it had not been ordinary work. How much? I looked at her. He told you. No. But he uses money when he wants people to call control a favor. There was more awareness in that sentence than I had expected. 250,000. Her face went pale. For what distance? She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. You didn't offer it. But I kept asking you to give him room. That is not the same thing. It feels close. She took the photograph from me and carried it back into the ballroom. Charles was speaking to the event coordinator when Lily placed the frame at the center of the guestbook table. "It stays," she said. He looked at her for several seconds, then he nodded. "Of course." His surrender was so easy that Lily seemed almost relieved. I was not. Charles had learned that moving the photograph openly would cost him more than leaving it. He had not changed his mind. He had changed tactics. The rehearsal dinner began beneath low candlelight and soft piano music. Charles seated me beside Grant Mercer. Grant owned Northbridge Facilities Group. He was broad through the shoulders and pink across the cheeks, with the relaxed expression of a man who assumed every room would eventually become friendly. "So you're the famous Helen," he said. "I didn't know I was famous. Charles says you built a staffing company from the ground up." He said that? With admiration. I looked across the table. Charles raised his glass toward me. For the first time all weekend I wondered whether he regretted the private offer. Then Grant said, "North Star did some subcontracting for Whitmore years ago, didn't it?" "More than some. I'm surprised we never met. Our work rarely overlapped. That may be changing. Northbridge is expanding into managed labor. Facilities companies often underestimate labor compliance." He laughed. "You sound like an auditor." "I've been called worse." Across the room, Ethan was speaking with Whitmore's finance director. He held a folded page at his side. Charles noticed it too. He excused himself and intercepted Ethan near the service doors. Their voices stayed low, but Ethan's face told the story. When he returned, he sat beside Lily and placed the page beneath his napkin. "What is it?" she whispered. "The original bid summary. You found it?" "Someone in finance sent it before access was removed." "Does it match the version your father gave you?" "No." Charles stood before Ethan could say more. His toast was warm and skillful. He spoke about marriage as an agreement to protect another person's future. He praised Lily's work as a pediatric occupational therapist. He told her she had brought calm into Ethan's life. For several minutes, I saw the father Ethan still loved. Then Charles said, "A successful marriage also requires knowing which voices belong inside it and which should remain outside." His gaze touched mine only briefly. Most guests heard advice. The four of us heard a warning. Later, Lily rose with a page in her hand. She thanked Victoria for the flowers and Aunt June for traveling. Then she looked at me. "My mother taught me that security was something you built, not something you waited for." Her voice shook. "She raised me while working nights. Later, she built a company in the same industry that once paid her by the hour." Charles shifted. Lily saw him. For 1 second, I thought she would shorten the rest. Instead, she continued. "There were years when I didn't understand what her work cost her. There were also years when she didn't tell me how hard things were. But I never doubted that as I was loved." The words were not perfect praise. They were better. They were true. "I am proud of where we began," she said. "And I am proud of who my mother became." She raised her glass, I raised mine. Charles began the applause, smiling as if the speech had not challenged him. "Beautiful," he said when Lily sat down. "A remarkable story of upward mobility." Lily's mouth tightened. Ethan touched her hand beneath the table. After dinner, I found them near the service corridor. Ethan held 2 versions of the Northbridge bid summary. "The scoring changed," he said. "Cost was weighted lower in the final version, and Northbridge gained points in categories that were not in the original request." "Who changed it?" Lily asked. "The revision came from the executive office." "Your father's office?" Ethan did not answer. "That means yes," she said. "It means I need more than one document." "You already knew something was wrong." "I suspected." "And you still plan to sign?" "No." It was the first firm answer he had given. "I told him tonight that I won't certify it." Lily stared at him. "What did he say?" "That I should think carefully about whether I am suited for executive responsibility." "And?" "I told him executive responsibility was why I couldn't sign." The answer had cost him. I saw it in the way he gripped the papers. Ethan looked at me. "I saved the emails in both spreadsheets." "Where?" "Outside the company system. Read-only copies with the original metadata. That may preserve the documents," I said. "It does not decide what you do with them." "I know." His voice was quiet, but he did not look away. Charles appeared at the end of the hallway. "Ethan, the photographer needs you." "No, he doesn't," Lily said. Charles stopped. Ethan folded the papers and placed them inside his jacket. "I'll be there in a minute." It was a small delay. To anyone else, it meant nothing. Charles understood it as disobedience. He left without another word. Lily leaned against the wall. "I don't want to be the reason he loses his family." Ethan turned to her. You aren't. You say that now. I should have said it sooner. She looked at him for a long moment, then she took his hand, not forgiveness, not yet. But not abandonment either. My phone vibrated, a message from Margaret appeared. Final exhibits uploaded. H. Carter authorization required before Wednesday's independent board session. Shareholder ratification may follow if the investigation supports removal. I turned the screen over, but not before Lily saw the initials. H. Carter? My initials. I know they are. She waited, after the photograph, after Charles's offer, after watching Ethan finally resist. Secrecy felt less like protection, and more like another person making decisions for Lily, I nearly told her. Then I saw Charles at the far end of the corridor, watching Ethan. 400 guests would arrive the next day. One revelation from me would give Charles a reason to turn the entire wedding into a fight over his position. After the wedding, I said. Lily's face closed slightly. You keep saying that. I know. I hope you're right about waiting. So did I. The next morning I wore the pale blue robe she had given me. The initials rested near my collarbone, each as C. To Lily they were a question. To Charles they meant nothing. Victoria entered the bridal suite shortly before noon. She waited until the bridesmaids moved into the adjoining room. Helen, Charles has planned a small joke for the reception. What kind of joke? He said it involves your early hotel career. Did you tell him not to do it? She adjusted the bracelet on her wrist. I told him humor can be misunderstood. That was not my question. Her eyes met mine. No. Lily turned from the mirror. What has he planned? I don't know exactly, Victoria said. He believes it will show affection. Lily stood. Tell him to cancel it. I'll speak with him. Don't speak with him. Tell him. Victoria left without promising. Lily looked at me through the mirror. I'm not asking you to ignore it. It was the first time she had said that. I know. If he does something cruel, I'll stop him. I wanted to believe she could. I wanted more to believe she would not have to. An hour later, I went downstairs. The ballroom doors stood open. Staff moved between tables beneath white roses and hanging lights. Charles stood beside the podium with the audiovisual technician. A velvet box rested near the microphone. He opened it. Something silver caught the light, then he handed the technician a flash drive. When I raised the box, Charles said, "Put the employee photograph on both screens." What photograph? The technician asked. The old housekeeping picture. Charles closed the lid. I stepped back before he saw me. The changed speech order. Victoria's warning, the velvet box, the photograph. Charles was not preparing a careless joke. He had planned the moment by 5 o'clock. The Whitmore Grand no longer looked like a hotel. It looked like a promise no ordinary life could afford. White roses climbed the ballroom columns. Hundreds of candles reflected in crystal glasses. A string quartet played beneath the staircase while 400 guests moved through the lobby in silk, black tie, and practiced smiles. I stood behind Lily while the photographer adjusted her veil. Her fingers kept returning to the pearl buttons at her wrist. Stop checking, I said. They're not going anywhere. What if something goes wrong? Something will. Aunt June is here. Lily laughed, then covered her mouth as if laughter might disturb her makeup. For a moment I remembered her at 6, asleep at our kitchen table with a red crayon in her hand. I had carried her to bed after a double shift, one arm beneath her knees, the other still smelling faintly of bleach. The memory passed quickly. The woman in front of me was about to make choices I could not make for her. Daniel appeared at the door. "Ms. Carter, we're ready." Charles stood behind him. "Daniel," he said. "Helen isn't one of your clients tonight. You can call her Helen." Daniel's expression did not change. "I prefer Miss Carter." Charles gave me a curious glance, then offered Lily his arm. She looked at it, then she took mine. "My mother is walking me." We discussed a united entrance. Charles said, "We are united." Victoria touched his sleeve. "Let them have this." Charles stepped aside with a gracious smile that did not reach his eyes. The ballroom doors opened, light struck Lily's veil. 400 faces turned toward us. Halfway down the aisle she whispered, "You're shaking, so are you." "I thought you never got nervous." "I never said that." Ethan waited beneath the floral arch. When I placed Lily's hand in his, he looked at me and said quietly, "Thank you." The ceremony lasted less than half an hour. Lily's voice broke during her vows. Ethan promised that he would not let fear make his decisions for him. Charles heard that. I saw it in the small movement of his jaw. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the ballroom erupted. For several minutes, everyone forgot the seating charts, the documents, the photographs, and the things Charles had tried to control. Lily laughed against Ethan's shoulder. I allowed myself to believe happiness could sometimes be stronger than the machinery built around it. During the reception, Daniel approached me near the head table. The East Conference Room is reserved for Wednesday, he said. Ms. Sloane asked us to secure the service entrance as well. That won't be necessary. Charles appeared beside us. Another staffing meeting, Daniel looked at him. Not exactly. Before Charles could ask more, a banquet manager called Daniel away. Charles watched him leave. You seem to have a complicated schedule for a mother of the bride. I have a life outside this ballroom. I am aware. Lily mentions you often. There was something in the word often. Not affection. Measurement. Ethan gave the welcome toast. He thanked the guests, the staff, and both families. Then he looked toward me. And Helen, thank you for raising the woman I was lucky enough to marry. Applause rose around the room. Lily reached for my hand. Charles clapped as well. When Ethan sat down, he leaned close enough for me to hear. Gratitude is best when it doesn't sound like debt. It wasn't debt, Ethan said. Charles smiled. Good, the first course arrived. Then the second. Conversation returned. But Victoria barely touched her food. The velvet box waited beside the microphone. Charles checked the podium twice. When he stood, the orchestra stopped before he reached the front. He had planned even the silence. Charles began well. He joked about Ethan's childhood attempt to become a saxophone player. He described the time his son painted half the family garage blue because he had misread a can label. He praised Lily's work with children and called her kind, intelligent, and steady. The guests relaxed. Even Lily smiled. Then Charles rested one hand on the velvet box. And Lily's strength, he said, clearly came from her mother. The screens behind him came alive. An employee photograph appeared. I was 28 in the picture, standing beside a housekeeping cart in a gray uniform. My shoes were cheap. My hair was pulled back. I looked tired, but I was smiling. I had not seen that photograph in almost 30 years. Lily whispered, "Oh God." Charles looked toward me. Helen understands Whitmore hotels better than most mothers of the bride. Several guests turned in my direction. While many of us knew these hotels from the lobby, she knew them from the linen closets. A few people laughed. Not many, enough. That is not criticism, Charles added quickly. Far from it. Honest work deserves respect. His voice had the warmth of a man preparing his own defense before anyone accused him. Helen worked hard, so Lily could have opportunities she never had. She raised an extraordinary daughter, and now Ethan has brought Lily into a family with the stability and tradition Helen spent her life trying to build. The words were polished enough to quote differently later. That was what made them cruel. He had turned my daughter's marriage into a rescue. He had made Ethan the final reward for a life he believed I had failed to provide. Around the ballroom, people reacted in different ways. A woman near the stage lowered her eyes. One of Charles's business friends smiled uncertainly, waiting for permission to laugh again. Several hotel employees stood completely still along the wall. A few guests continued looking amused. Perhaps they thought this was the harmless family story Charles had promised them. Charles opened the velvet box. Inside was a silver-plated hotel keycard edged in brass. My old employee number had been engraved across the front. Below it were the words, "From housekeeping to high society." I thought Helen deserved a souvenir, he said. A silver key this time, because tonight she finally gets to enjoy the hotel from the guest side. One man laughed loudly, then stopped when his wife touched his arm. Charles carried the plaque toward me. The screen still showed my younger face. For a second, I was back in that uniform, not ashamed. Never ashamed. I remembered cracked hands in winter. I remembered counting tips at the kitchen table. I remembered Lily sleeping in the manager's office when the babysitter had the flu. I also remembered the first house I bought, the first employee I promoted, the first hotel executive who called me for advice instead of asking me to clean up someone else's mistake. Charles had selected one photograph and mistaken it for the whole story. He stopped beside my chair and held out the plaque. For Helen. There was scattered applause. I did not take it. His smile sharpened. Come on, it's only a little family humor. Lily pushed back her chair. That's enough. Her voice did not reach the back of the room. Charles acted as though he had not heard. He placed the silver card on the table in front of me. I hope you'll accept it in the spirit intended. The ballroom smelled of roses, wine, and warm food. Somewhere behind me, a spoon touched a plate with a small metallic sound. I thought of the agreement Charles had placed in front of me, $250,000 for distance, When money failed, he had chosen humiliation. Not because he hated my past. Because he wanted Lily and Ethan to understand what happened to anyone who stepped outside the place he assigned them. I reached for the microphone. Charles held it away for half a second. Only half. Long enough for me to see the choice. Then he gave it to me because refusing would have looked worse. I was 28 when that picture was taken, I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. My husband had left. My daughter was 8 months old. I needed work that would keep food in our kitchen and heat in our apartment. No one moved. I cleaned rooms. I changed sheets. I scrubbed bathrooms used by people who never knew my name. I looked toward the employees along the wall. There was no shame in any of it. Charles's smile began to fade. That job kept my daughter safe. It taught me how hotels actually run, and it introduced me to some of the finest people I have ever known. I turned toward him. So no, Charles. You cannot embarrass me with honest work. I placed the microphone back on the podium. I could have said more. I could have explained why Daniel called me Miss Carter. I could have told the room why Margaret Sloane had been sending me documents. But this was still Lily's wedding. I would not turn her reception into my announcement. Charles reclaimed the microphone. That was beautifully said, he told the room. I knew Helen would appreciate the gesture once she understood it. The lie was effortless. He wanted to fold my answer back into his joke and close the moment before anyone could name what he had done. Lily moved before I did. She took the microphone from his hand. The speakers gave a sharp burst of feedback. I need to say something. Her hands were shaking. She looked at me first. I'm sorry. The apology reached deeper than Charles's speech, not because she had caused it, because she knew she had spent too long trying to keep him comfortable. She faced the guests. My mother did work in housekeeping. Her voice broke, but she continued. She worked nights because she had a baby and no husband helping her. She came home tired and still made breakfast. She missed sleep, not birthdays. Charles stepped toward her. Lily, no, you had your turn. The room went completely still. She did not spend her life trying to get me into a better family, Lily said. She was my family. She was the reason I had a home, an education, and the courage to stand here. Tears gathered in her eyes, her voice became steadier. I married Ethan because I love him. Not because he rescued me, not because his name improved mine. She looked directly at Charles. And I will not begin my marriage by letting anyone treat my mother's life like a joke. Ethan placed one hand against her back. Charles spoke without the microphone. This is being taken far too seriously. Lily looked at him. You put her employee photograph on 2 screens in front of 400 people. It was meant affectionately. No, it was meant to put her in her place. A murmur moved through the room. Charles glanced toward the guests, measuring the damage. This is your wedding, he said. Think carefully before you turn a misunderstanding into a public scene. Lily looked down at the silver card. She picked it up. For 1 second I thought she might throw it. Instead, she placed it in Charles's hand. You made it public. The simple sentence reached places shouting could not. Color climbed into his neck. Victoria rose. Perhaps everyone should take a short break. No, Charles said. He returned to the podium. We have had an emotional moment, which is understandable on a wedding day. We all admire Helen's determination. We all respect where she began. Even then, he needed the room to believe my story ended beneath his. Ethan reached for the microphone. Dad, apologize. Charles looked at him. I have nothing to apologize for. You humiliated her. I honored her. No, Ethan said. You tried to make Lily grateful that our family accepted her. Charles's face changed not because Ethan had accused him, because Ethan had done it publicly. You're confused, Charles said, and I understand why. Ethan stepped closer. No, for the first time I'm not. Before Charles could answer, a chair scraped near the center of the ballroom. Margaret Sloane stood. Charles knew her as the independent chair of the Whitmore Grand Hotel's board. Her flight had been delayed, and she had entered the reception quietly after dinner began. She looked directly at me. Ms. Carter, she said clearly. As the controlling principal of HC Hospitality Holdings, or Grand's second largest voting shareholder, I believe the board chair should speak with you before Charles says anything else. Charles stopped moving. For several seconds, the ballroom made no sound. Charles stared at Margaret, then at me. HC Hospitality Holdings? Yes, Margaret said. You represent the partnership. No, Helen controls it. Lily's fingers closed around my arm. HC, she whispered. Helen Carter. Yes. The hurt in her face was different now. Charles had exposed my past. I had hidden part of our present. Charles looked toward Daniel and Whitmore's chief financial officer. Neither man corrected Margaret. How? He asked. It was the first honest question he had asked me all weekend. I looked toward the black screens behind him. North Star supplied trained staff to Whitmore hotels for years, I said. During the financial crisis, Whitmore fell behind on what it owed us. Margaret stepped closer. The unpaid balance exceeded $2 million. Forcing immediate collection would likely have closed several properties and damaged both companies. We negotiated, I said. Whitmore paid part in cash. The rest became preferred shares and warrants. Margaret continued. Helen later exercised the warrants, reinvested dividends and purchased shares from 2 departing investors. She looked at Charles H.C. Hospitality Holdings currently controls 18% of Whitmore Grand Hotel's voting rights. A murmur moved through the ballroom. A man near the front whispered. 18? The number impressed the room in a way my years of labor had not. That did not please me. Lily looked at me. You saved the company? No, a lot of people did. Employees stayed when the future was uncertain. Vendors accepted delayed payments. Investors took risks. North Star was one part. An important part, Margaret said. Without North Star's settlement, Whitmore would likely have lost multiple operating properties. Charles stared at me as though wealth had rearranged my features. Minutes earlier, he had used my uniform to prove that I did not belong in his world. Now he was searching my face for the shareholder whose approval he might need. He looked toward the guests and forced a laugh. Well, it appears Helen has been keeping an impressive secret. No one joined him. I suppose that makes the gift even more appropriate. From employee to major owner, Margaret's expression hardened. Charles placed the silver card on the podium. Helen, I apologize if my humor caused offense. If, I repeated, I intended to celebrate your success. Would you be apologizing if Margaret had not stood up? His eyes moved toward the board chair. That is irrelevant. No, it is the only relevant part. I did not need the microphone. The room was silent enough. You are not sorry you insulted me, Charles. You are sorry you insulted someone with voting power. A woman near the back whispered. Exactly. Color rose higher along his suit. You are assigning motives to me. I watched your motives change. I stopped before the moment became another performance. Nothing about me became more respectable when you heard the number 18. I was the same woman when I cleaned rooms. I was the same woman when you offered me money to reduce contact with my daughter. Lily turned sharply. You offered her money? Charles said. It was a consulting proposal. Did it limit how often she could speak to me? He did not answer. Lily's face crumpled for one brief second, then she turned toward me. I kept asking you to be patient with him. Lily, no. I need to say it. Her voice was quieter now. I saw enough to know he was hurting you. I thought if I kept everyone calm, I could get through the wedding without losing anyone. She wiped beneath one eye. Every time I asked you to stay quiet, I made it easier for him. I was still wrong. Charles said. You are emotional. She looked at him. Yes, it's my wedding. Ethan took her hand. Charles watched him do it. Ethan, he said, take your wife away from this. She is standing where she wants to stand. I am still your father, and I am still your son. That is why I gave you more chances than I would have given anyone else. Ethan removed the folded bid summaries from his jacket. I will not sign the Northbridge certification. Grant Mercer pushed back from his table. This is hardly the place. Neither are altered bid scores, Ethan said. Grant's face reddened. Charles stepped toward his son. Put those documents away. No, the word was quiet. It changed the room more than shouting would have. A woman near the ballroom doors stood. Diane Holloway, Whitmore's vice president of employee relations, carried a slim black folder and a small encrypted drive. Charles saw her. For the first time that evening, fear replaced calculation. This is a family matter, Charles said. Diane approached Margaret. No, it stopped being only a family matter months ago. The hotel employees along the wall watched her closely. My office received related wage complaints from 6 Whitmore properties, Diane said. The originals are preserved in our case management system, under legal hold. Margaret's expression sharpened. Were they produced to Nora Chen? I was told they had been. Tonight I learned the audit committee received only revised summaries. Diane opened the folder. The complaints involved employees collecting supplies before clocking in, attending mandatory meetings after clock out, and being transferred after questioning missing wages. Charles lowered his voice. Those matters were reviewed and found overstated. Diane held up 2 reports. This is the original pattern report. This is the version returned by your executive office. She handed both to Margaret. Employee statements were removed. Estimated liability was reduced by more than 70%. That is your interpretation, Charles said. The document history is not. Several servers exchanged looks. Marisol stood near Daniel, her arms folded across her waist. Margaret accepted the encrypted drive but did not open it. No evidence will be evaluated in this ballroom, she said. Chain of custody will be documented tonight. Outside counsel will authenticate every file. Charles looked toward me. Helen, you understand what public accusations can do to a company. I do. Then help me stop this. 10 minutes earlier, he had apologized because he learned I had power. Now he wanted me to use it for him. I will not decide anything tonight, I said. His shoulders eased slightly. And I will not protect you from a fair review. The relief disappeared. Lily looked at Margaret. Does my mother's vote decide what happens? Not by itself. The board can suspend a chief executive by majority vote. Permanent removal for cause requires another board vote and ratification by 2/3 of the voting rights under the Whitmore Family Governance Agreement. She glanced at me. Helen's 18% may determine whether that threshold is reached. Charles looked around the ballroom. The guests who had laughed at his joke would carry the story home. The workers he expected to remain invisible were watching him openly now. Victoria approached him. Charles, sit down. He pulled his arm away. This wedding is over. No, Lily said. He turned toward her. My wedding is not over because you lost control of the room. Charles looked at Ethan. Are you going to allow her to speak to me that way? Ethan's expression settled into something quieter than anger. She does not need my permission. Victoria closed her eyes. Charles suddenly looked older. Margaret checked her watch. We will not conduct corporate business here. She turned toward Daniel. Reserve the East Conference Room for 8 tomorrow morning. It is already secured, he said. Margaret faced Diane. Deliver the original complaint records to outside counsel. Preserve the HR system logs and every transmission record. Then Ethan. Bring both bid summaries and all related communications you retained. I will. Finally, she looked at me. Counsel will send a revised conflict disclosure. The wedding incident will be recorded, but it will not substitute for evidence. I understand. Charles stepped between us. You have already decided the outcome. No, Margaret said. That is what the investigation is for. No one applauded. That mattered. This was not victory. It was the moment the room stopped laughing and began paying attention. At 8 the next morning, the East Conference Room looked nothing like the ballroom. There were no flowers, candles, or champagne glasses. Only a long walnut table, secure screens, water pitchers, and folders arranged in exact rows. Charles arrived with 2 attorneys. He did not look at me. Margaret sat at the head of the table. 5 independent directors attended in person, 2 appeared by secure video. Nora Chen, the outside investigator, sat beside company counsel. Diane placed her black folder on the table. Ethan sat near the door, separate from his father and the board. Before the meeting began, I signed a conflict disclosure describing the wedding incident and Charles's consulting offer. I also stated that neither would be the sole basis for any corporate decision. Charles's attorney adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Carter's personal grievance clearly affects her judgment. Ms. Carter, I said. He glanced at me. Ms. Carter's personal grievance. It affects me, I replied. That is why I disclosed it. Charles finally looked up. The confidence he had worn at the wedding was gone. He had spent the night preparing to defend himself before people who could not be silenced by a seating chart. Nora began with Northbridge. She projected the original bid comparison and the revised version side by side. The original ranked Northbridge third. The later document lowered the importance of price, added 2 scoring categories, and moved Northbridge to first. Ethan identified the files and explained how he had obtained the read-only copies. My father asked me to certify final quantities that did not match the field reports. Charles leaned toward his microphone. I asked my son to complete his assigned work. You told me I would lose my office if I refused. I questioned your readiness for executive responsibility. You tied my career to approving numbers I could not verify. Ethan's hands were flat on the table. They did not shake. Nora displayed the emails. Charles stopped interrupting. One message from his office instructed procurement to revise the comparison to reflect strategic value, rather than short-term price differences. Another told Ethan that continued resistance would be noted during succession planning. Then came the payment records. Northbridge had transferred money to CW Advisory Services shortly after receiving 2 major Whitmore contracts. Corporate filings connected CW Advisory to Charles. His attorneys described the payments as legitimate consulting income unrelated to Whitmore. Nora asked for contracts, none had been produced. She asked for invoices describing the services, there were none, meeting notes, work product. Emails discussing the supposed consulting assignments, nothing. Grant Mercer had transferred more than $400,000 to a company owned by Charles, and neither man could document what had been purchased. Diane's evidence came next. The HR system audit trail confirmed that the employee complaints had been created months before the wedding and placed under legal hold. The first complaint came from a housekeeper required to collect linens and load her cart before clocking in. The second came from a banquet worker ordered to attend mandatory post-shift meetings after clocking out. A single mother had been transferred to a property 40 miles farther from her home after asking payroll to correct missing hours. The documents did not shout, they did not need to names, dates, time records, and emails filled the room more effectively than anger could have. Diane placed the original pattern report beside the revised one. The executive version removed employee statements and reduced estimated liability. Charles's attorney objected to the word removed. Nora displayed the document history. The revisions had been made through an account assigned to Charles's chief of staff. Then she projected an email from Charles, bring the exposure down to a defensible level before this reaches the committee. Charles leaned back. That referred to inflated assumptions, not facts. Margaret looked at him. Then why did the committee never receive the original report? He said, the chief of staff had misunderstood. The chief of staff interviewed during the night, said Charles had instructed her personally. For nearly 3 hours, the directors questioned him. He blamed poor documentation, aggressive employees, inexperienced executives, a vindictive son, a politically motivated HR department, language taken out of context. What he did not do was accept responsibility. At 11:20, Margaret called a recess. Charles found me near the windows. You know what this company means to my family. I know what it means to thousands of families. You believe removing me protects them? I have not cast a final vote. After last night, no one will believe that. That is why the evidence has to survive my anger. For the first time, he seemed to understand that I was not trying to win an argument with him. I was trying to make a decision I could defend when the emotion faded. His voice lowered. If I had known who you were, I looked at him. He stopped. That unfinished sentence told me more than an apology could have. If he had known who I was, he would have treated me differently, not because he respected labor, because he respected leverage. When the meeting resumed, the independent directors voted unanimously to suspend Charles as chief executive, effective immediately. He was barred from company systems, witness contact, operational decisions, and access to financial records while the investigation continued. An interim chief executive would assume control that afternoon. Charles remained seated after the vote. You are handing this company to outsiders. Margaret closed her folder. No. We are protecting it from someone who confused family control with permission. The final investigation took 3 weeks, it needed to. External auditors verified the Northbridge transfers. Employment Council confirmed unpaid work across 6 properties. The original complaints were authenticated. More employees came forward after learning the earlier reports had been preserved. Charles received the full report and 10 days to respond. He submitted 74 pages. None explained the money. The board voted to remove him for cause. The shareholder ratification followed the next morning. Without HC Hospitality Holdings, the supporting votes fell below the required 2/3 threshold. With my 18%, they passed it. When my name was called, I said only, in favor. There was no applause. There should not have been. A man had lost his career. A family had fractured. Employees had been harmed for years. Justice did not need celebration, it needed completion. Charles's removal did not repair the company by itself. Whitmore paid back wages, interest, and penalties to affected employees. Procurement contracts were reviewed. Northbridge was suspended as a vendor while the payment records were referred to the proper authorities. Deanne was placed in charge of a new employee protection office that reported directly to the board. Marisol received her overtime. So did every member of her team. Ethan resigned before anyone asked him to. He left his badge on Margaret's desk and accepted a lower-paying position with a smaller energy consulting firm. There was no family name above the entrance. He looked lighter. Lily postponed their honeymoon. For a while, she and Ethan lived in separate apartments and met with a marriage counselor twice a week. They had loved each other before the wedding. Love had not disappeared. Neither had the things they had hidden. Victoria moved out of the house she had shared with Charles. She did not become brave overnight. For months, she spoke of what happened as a tragedy that had gotten out of control. Lily refused to help her reunite the family until she stopped calling Charles's decisions misunderstandings. Lily came to my house most Sundays. At first, our conversations stayed safe: work weather, Aunt June's blood pressure. Then one afternoon, she placed Charles's unsigned consulting agreement on my kitchen table. I found it in his office, she said. I looked at the pages he had used to put a price on distance. I should have told you that day. Yes, I thought I was protecting you. You were deciding what I could handle. She nodded. I learned that from you. The truth stung because it was partly deserved. I suppose you did. She reached across the table but stopped before touching my hand. I am not asking you to say everything is fine, it isn't. I know. Her voice shook. I kept asking you to absorb him because I thought your strength made it cost you less. You could handle it, so I let you. I could handle it. That does not mean I should have asked you to. She did not remind me that she had eventually taken the microphone. She did not ask for credit for standing up after the damage was done. She sat there and allowed the harm to remain visible. That mattered more than a perfect apology. We can repair this, I said. But not by pretending the crack was never there. She placed her hand over mine. Then we start with the crack. That fall I used part of the dividends from HC Hospitality Holdings to establish the Open Door Fund. It provided emergency childcare, professional certification fees, and community college tuition for single mothers working in hotels. Whitmore Grand Hotels agreed to match employee contributions, but the fund remained independently governed. No chief executive could turn it into a publicity campaign or remove support when a quarterly budget became inconvenient. The first grant went to a night auditor studying accounting. The second paid for 6 months of childcare, while a banquet server completed nursing prerequisites. The third helped a housekeeper earn a facilities management certificate. I did not put my name on the fund. The point was not to make women remember Helen Carter. It was to give them enough support to build lives no one else could define for them. Several months later, Lily called and asked whether she and Ethan could use my garden. For what? A ceremony. You're already married. We know. They did not want another expensive reception. They wanted a beginning that belonged to them. Aunt June arranged folding chairs beneath the maple trees. Ethan's sister brought flowers from a farmer's market. Daniel came with his husband. Marisol attended in a yellow dress and complained that I had seated her too far from the cake. There were 32 guests. No orchestra, giant screens, no corporate donors. Lily wore a simple cream dress. Ethan wore the same suit he had used for job interviews after leaving Whitmore. Before they renewed their vows, Lily walked toward me carrying a small box. Inside was the silver hotel key card. I thought about throwing it away, she said. So did I, but it belongs to your story now. No, I said, it belongs to his. She considered that, then she turned the card over. Charles's inscription remained visible beneath a narrow brass plate Lily had added. The new words read, "Honest work opened every door." I paid for it myself, she said. No Whitmore account. I laughed before I could stop myself, then she became serious. I am sorry I made you stand alone while I tried to keep everyone else comfortable. You came back. Late. Yes, I cannot change that. No, but I can stop doing it. I touched her cheek. I believe you are trying. It was not complete forgiveness, it was better, it was true. She returned to Ethan. Their second vows were shorter than the first. Ethan promised to tell the truth before fear made silence convenient. Lily promised never to confuse peace with surrender. When they kissed, Aunt June applauded before the officiant finished speaking. No one minded. And 1 year later, 1 year after Charles's wedding speech, the Open Door Fund had helped 43 families. 12 women had completed professional certificates. 7 had begun college programs. 26 children had stable childcare during evening and weekend shifts. The numbers mattered. The names mattered more. At the fund's small office, We mounted the silver key beside photographs of the first grant recipients. Not as proof that I had defeated Charles. Not as proof that I controlled 18% of anything. It reminded me how easily people confused the entrance someone used with the value they carried inside. One evening, after a fund meeting at the Whitmore Grand, a young housekeeper pushed her cart toward the service corridor. She held the heavy door open for me. Guest elevators are the other way, Mom. I know. I followed her through. The corridor smelled of clean linen and lemon polish. Carts rattled over the tile. Someone laughed near the laundry room. It felt familiar, not small. Never small. A staff door never diminished the person who walked through it.